Good day to you all, comrades and friends. This is Global Weekly News, serial number 41. First, let us see the US attack on Syria. Syria became independent in 1946. Political instability was there due to conflicts between different social, religious, and political groups. In 1970, Hafez al-Assad, the dictator, took over power. He spent large sums of money on military budget to defend the national security and to recover the land seized by Israel in 1967. After his death, his son Bashar al-Assad became the president. He unleashed repression on political dissenters. This led to Syria's internal civil war. Syria was a member of Arab League of 22 nations. Since Bashar al-Assad killed the civilians, Saudi Arabia withdrew its ambassador from Syria. US appealed to Saudi Arabia and some other Gulf nations, Qatar and United Arab Emirates, to supply arms to anti-Assad forces and got support from them. Syria has been recovering the lost regions with the support of Russia and Iran. Due to earthquake in Syria in February of this year, along with Turkey, more than 6,000 people died in Syria alone. Many Arab nations, unmindful of US sanctions on Syria, sent humanitarian aid to Syria. In March of this year, at the intervention of People's Republic of China, Saudi Arabia and Iran signed a bilateral cordial agreement. Following this, relations between Arab nations and Syria are improving. Syria may be readmitted in the Arab League in its summit meeting on 19th May of this year. Assad is making attempts to restore normal relations with the Arab nations and Turkey, and this has upset United States over this development. US says that there was a drone attack on its base in Syria, and in retaliation to that, US attacked Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Security Corps in Syria. Iran's officials said that what US is telling is totally false. US helicopters attacked Syria to disturb the prevailing peace in Syria. 11 civilians were killed in Syria due to US attacks. There are more than 1,000 US troops and innumerable military contractors within Syria. US has occupied northeastern region of Syria. This is not as per UN Security Council resolution. Therefore, US occupation of northeastern Syria is entirely illegal. Peace is getting restored in West Asia. The influence of the United States and the Western countries are on the decline in this region. Let us next go to Mexico. Retrograde immigration policy of United States that we are going to see now. Lakhs of migrants from Asia, Africa and Latin America. They want to migrate to United States in search of jobs. During that process, they face innumerable hurdles. They want to choose the path from Mexico to migrate to US. Mexico is just south of United States. When Donald Trump was United States President, he threatened Mexico about US sanctions on Mexico if Mexico allows migration to US irregularly. Safe third country immigration agreement was signed between Mexico and United States. Mexican authorities many times emphasized that United States shall encourage development of Central America and South Mexico through financial aid and create job opportunities for migrants in United States. But Joe Biden did not react in a positive manner. National Institute of Migration is running migration centers in Mexico on US borders. 39 people died in a fire accident at Ciudad Juarez Migration Center on 27th March. Out of 68 migrants in this center, 29 were hospitalized for their injuries. These migrants are from different countries: Venezuela, Ecuador, Colombia, El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala. The people who want to migrate to US from Mexico have first to apply to Mexico. This procedure is as per Safe Third Country Immigration Agreement. There are troops on both sides of the borders. Joe Biden declared that a more humanitarian immigration policy will be implemented, but in practice, that is not followed. Totally different things are followed. There is overcrowding in Mexico's migration centers. News spread about deporting the migrants to their respective countries. Some of the migrants got angry over this and set fire to mattresses in the rooms. And this developed into a big fire accident and 39 people were killed. This is unfortunate. That's what Mexico's President Lopez Obrador said. Migrants from many countries have to pass through deserts, forests, mountains, etc. Hundreds die on the way itself before reaching Mexico. Third, we are going to African country, Kenya. In Nairobi, capital of African country, Kenya, thousands of people protested in the streets against price rise. These protests took place defying the police ban. On 20th March, 21-year-old university student was shot dead. On 27th March, in Kisumu town, another youth was shot dead. William Ruto won in the presidential elections in 2022 by a narrow margin, defeating Raila Odinga. Odinga called upon the people to protest against the price rise. Police used tear gas and water cannons on the protesters. Journalists were also attacked. The Editors Guild condemned this. Police blocked Odinga's convoy of cars. Attacks took place on the family properties of Odinga and ex-president Uhuru Kenyatta. Majority of Kenyans were angry with the government, which has been following neoliberal policies since 1980s. Due to austerity and retrenchment policies, many workers died, according to Womol, organizing secretary of the Communist Party of Kenya. Due to rise in prices of food and transport, inflation rose by 9.2% in a year. Due to the prevailing drought situation in Kenya, 54 lakh people will face food insecurity from March to June. Power tariffs went up 10%. Kenya's currency value declined significantly. Government is having foreign currency reserves just for importing during the next 4 months. Kenya is in debt crisis. Nearly half of the government revenues go for debt repayment. The incumbent President William Ruto, at the time of elections, spoke in support of poor people. But after coming to power, he yielded to the pressures of IMF and World Bank. He withdrew fuel and maize subsidies. Maize, it's a grain, food grain, maize. Besides, government is proposing tax increases on the poor people. Government has decided to freeze the public sector. IMF is insisting on wage reduction for public sector employees. William Ruto has earned large sums of money through corruption. But he told tribal youth that he earned his wealth by selling chickens and eggs and got their support. Even the far-right evangelical society is supporting Ruto. Ruto allotted in his budget $37.9 crore for people to start up business. But due to the economic crisis, People did not start any new business. They had to spend government funds to purchase the food grain maize. On 21st March, Kenyan cabinet passed privatization bill. Government decided to privatize public universities, banks and state 10 companies within a year. Government gave away the vacant lands to multinationals to create jobs. These MNCs built labor camps in these lands to exploit Kenya's resources. Both William Ruto and Odinga follow the same neoliberal policies. Communist Party of Kenya and the left have to place a clear alternative policy before the people. Communist Party of Kenya Organizing Secretary Omol says that the capitalist system has to be changed. Fourth, we are going to important news item regarding elections in Cuba. Last year, a new family code was passed in Cuba after conducting a referendum. Consultation meetings took place on a large scale before the referendum. This is the world's most progressive act. This family code ensures the rights of LGBTQ, elderly, displaced persons, women and children. On 26th March of this year, elections were held for 470 posts in the National Assembly. 75% voters voted, but US mainstream media is projecting 25% absentees only. In US presidential elections, the highest polling is only 66.2%. US is alleging that Cuban elections are not free and fair. Large-scale campaign does not take place in Cuba. Only Communist Party dominates in the political system. Well, these are the allegations of US. Though elections took place on 26th March in Cuba, election process started months before. For candidates' selection, wide consultation exercises took place in municipalities, mass and class organizations. In Cuba, voting rate starts from the age of 16. Even 18-year-old can become a candidate. The candidate need not belong to Communist Party of Cuba. The elected member does not get any salary. He, like other Cuban workers, the elected legislators have to work along with the other workers. More number of black people, women and youth contested in this year's elections. Majority were women. Total empowerment of women has taken place in Cuba. Out of 470 legislators, 98 are below 35 years of age. So you have a very good number of young members of the National Assembly. US electoral system is entirely different one. Only those who have lots of money and those who can spend a lot of money for campaigning and elections, they can get elected in USA. It is not like that in Cuba. Both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party in the United States follow the same capitalist neo-economic policies. Once in 2 years, midterm elections also take place. Campaigns are held for many months. And the candidates in US spend a lot of money towards this and they get aid from the corporates, funds from the corporates. After the successful Cuban Revolution in 1959, the living standards, life expectancy, health and education and other services improved to a very great extent despite US sanctions for more than 6 decades. In the pre-revolution period, maternity deaths were more. Only 60% were literate. Due to poverty, many diseases spread. Sexual exploitation and trafficking of women were there on a large scale before revolution took place in Cuba. When Donald Trump was the president, he included Cuba in the list of states sponsoring terrorism. Due to this, many foreign companies and foreign financial institutions are reluctant to do any business with Cuba due to fear of US retaliations on them. Because of this, there are shortages of raw materials, medicine, and fuel in Cuba. Joe Biden could have removed Cuba from the list of nations sponsoring terrorism just by signing, but he has not done that. He promised that during the elections. 2 days after the Cuban elections, on 28 March, the conservative US legislators successfully pushed through legislation in the House of Representatives Foreign Affairs Committee that would codify into law Cuba's designation as a state sponsor of terrorism. This bill will prohibit Cuba from being removed under the state sponsors of terrorism list unless Cuba meets three impossible criteria. 1. Release all the political prisoners and allow for investigations of Cuban prisons by appropriate international human rights organizations. Second, transition away from the Fidel Castro regime to a system that guarantees of the rights of the Cuban people to express themselves freely. And third, to commit to holding free and fair elections. These three criteria demands that the Cuban people themselves should overthrow their own elected government and overturn the Cuban political system which has been built by the people all these 6 decades. US accents amount to Satan chanting the holy verses. Finally, we go to Ghana, again African country, which due to IMF conditions very much suffering. African country Ghana is holding golden reserves, the 6th largest in the world. But these gold mines do not belong to the people of Ghana. The gold mines are being exploited by multinational corporations. Ghana has been implementing the neoliberal policies dictated by US. Inflation has risen in an unprecedented way. Ghana is seeking IMF loan for the 18th time, a loan of $300 crore. Socialist movement of Ghana is opposing these policies. Both through military power and financial power, US is creating crisis in many countries of the African continent. US Vice President Kamala Harris, Finance Secretary Janet Yellen, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, State of Secretary Antony Blinken have recently visited Africa, not for the mitigation of the poor people, but for exploiting African natural resources in collaboration with the elitist people of Africa, that is the high rich people of Africa. US is attempting to reduce China's influence in the African continent. Well, this is all this week's Global Weekly News, serial number 41. See you next week, comrades. Lal Salam.